Good afternoon, class. This is practice test number 1, covering chapter 2, equations and inequalities. This is the first portion of it. So, chapter 2, equations and inequalities, we want to answer the following. Find the distance between these 2 points. So, how do we find the distance? I'd like to remind you of what we have learned. In order to find the distance between 2 points, we basically use Pythagorean theorem. So we want the distance between these 2 points, where the first one is given by x sub 1, y sub 1, and the second one is given by x sub 2, y sub 2. It doesn't matter which one you take it to be the first point, which one you take it to be the second point. This distance, if we look at the x coordinates of the two, is this distance, which is the same as what you see here, one side or one leg of this right triangle. This is a right triangle. So this distance, the reason we put it in absolute value, because if you interchange x sub 1 and x sub 2, it doesn't matter. The absolute value makes it positive. The other leg is this distance, which is the distance between y sub 2 and y sub 1. And again, you put it in absolute value because if you put it in any order, it will make it positive. So what we use here is the following. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. Known as Pythagorean theorem. So if that is the case, and that's the distance squared, or if we call this p sub 1, this one p sub 2, this is the distance between p sub 1 and p sub 2 squared. So the distance is the square root of that. Just to refresh your memory as far as how we get to the distance. Therefore, we have this formula, and let me clean up the mess. Distance is the square root of x sub 2 minus x sub 1 quantity squared plus y sub 2 minus y sub 1 quantity squared. And we are going to plug in. Now, here's the x sub 1, here's the x sub 2. In any order, it doesn't matter because it gets squared up. Here's y sub 1, here's y sub 2. Let's just plug in. So 4 minus negative 5, 4 minus negative 5, and 2 minus negative 6. Of course, this means positive. So this is 4 minus negative 5. This is 4 minus negative 5. This is 2 minus 6. So when we square 9, we get 81. When we square 8, we get 64. We add them up, and it's 145. This is the exact answer. And approximation with a bunch of decimals. Normally you use a lot of decimals, but stick with what they ask you. This is how we find the distance between the 2 points. The next one is asking for the midpoint. Given the first one with coordinates x sub 1, y sub 1, and the second one x sub 2, y sub 2, how do we find the coordinates of the midpoint? We add up the coordinates for each case, the x coordinates divided by 2 and the y coordinates divided by 2. If you drop a perpendicular, this is a right triangle, this is a right triangle, and this small one is similar to the large one. So we have similar triangles. The small one and the large one. And we can find the ratio of each case. This, let's give it a name. If we call this A, B, and C, let's find this point as D and this point as E. If you look at the fact that they are similar triangles, then AD over AB is the same as AE over AC, and we know this is 1/2. And the reason we know that, because this is the midpoint between these two. And so is this. This is 1/2. The midpoint is right here. You add up the x coordinates, you divide by 2, and the same thing, similar thing can be said about the y coordinates. So with that being the case, let's clean up again and add them up. -5 and 4 divided by 2, -6 and 2 divided by 2. -1/2, -4 halves, or -2. So in short, for part A, the precise answer and the approximation. For part B, the midpoint. All right. Anybody feels like reading this question for us? Please, Sharon, go ahead. Yes, go ahead, Sharon.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
A man drove 10 miles directly east from his home, made a left turn at an intersection, and then traveled 5 miles north to his place of work.
Perfect. We want to look at the situation in parts A and B. So let's first do the drawing of the situation. So we are going to go 10 miles east. 5 miles north. If a road was made directly from his home to his place of work, what would its distance be to the nearest tenth of a mile? So we use Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. In essence, this is A. This is B, and hypotenuse C. So plug in. A is 10, so 10 squared. B is 5, so 5 squared. 10 squared is 100. 5 squared, 25. So precisely square root of 125, and roughly with a bunch of decimals, 11.18034, and we use the same units, miles. Part B says, if the road was made in the previous exercise, how much shorter would the man's one-way trip be every day? So we have to go 10 miles, and then we have to go another 5 miles. We have to travel total of 15 miles. So if we go directly, we go this much, 100 square root of 125, or about 11.18. And we are going to subtract this from the sum of 10 and 5. So 10 plus 5 minus the square root of 125. And we use only a decimal or 2, because it says nearest tenth of a mile. So first I wanted to show you with more decimals, and then we use only 1 decimal, so about 3.8 miles. That would be the difference between the two. Solve. This is a rational equation, and we want to solve. So to solve rational equations, the best course of action is to clear out all the fractions. So if we factor every denominator, we notice the first one doesn't need anything, the second one doesn't need anything. This one needs to be factored, and you may notice is the product of x plus 1 and x minus 3. So two things. Number one, you have to exclude what makes each denominator 0. What makes this one 0? Negative 1. What makes this one 0? Positive 3. The same goes for this one, because it's a product of these two. So first and foremost, exclude those. When we finish the job, we have to check with that. Sometimes we get solutions that involve those. We call them extraneous solutions, and we get rid of them. So with that being the case, let's multiply both sides by LCD, which means x plus 1 times x minus 3. So what happens? First of all, this notation means that you're multiplying every piece by that. That's the meaning of putting everything in brackets. multiplying by this expression. If you multiply these two, x plus 1 goes away, you get 5 times x minus 3. If you multiply these two, x minus 3 goes away, 1 times x plus 1. And the right side, everything cancels out, you're left with negative 6. So again, when you multiply these two, x plus 1 goes away, 5 times x minus 3. You multiply these two, x minus 3 goes away. And the right side, everything drops and you're left with the numerator. And now practically it's a linear equation, very simple to solve. We are going to distribute the 5. 5x minus 15 here, plus x plus 1. The right side doesn't change. We have 6x. Minus 14 on the left. Negative 14 moves to the right, becomes positive 14. With negative 6, they add up to 8x. 8. Divide both sides by 6. Get rid of a common factor of 2. The final answer is 4/3. Check. We are fine. And that is the final answer. All right. Lines, slopes, and its interpretation of slope. All right. So we want to refresh everyone's memory as far as what we know about those, first and foremost.
Sure.
Everybody remembers the meaning of the slope.
Yeah.
And slope is defined as change in y over change in x, which is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. This is known as rise over run. So depending upon the text, sometimes you see this notation, delta y, change in y, over delta x, change in x, rise over run. It is also known as the average rate of change of y with respect to x. This is the interpretation, this is the definition, and when it comes to application, is truly helpful. So the average rate of change of y with respect to x. When we look at lines, we have various lines here. Here's the x axis, here's the y axis, and we have various lines. If you look at the first one in red, L sub 1 has a positive slope, meaning as we go from left to right, not only x increases, also y increases. That's the meaning of positive slope. If you look at L sub 2, we have a negative slope, meaning as we go from left to right, x increases, but y decreases. So let me write that next to it. It's extremely important. Again, as we go from left to right, obviously left to right. Obviously, x increases. Let's just put it this way, meaning x increases. As we look at this red line, y increases too. This brownish color, y decreases, and that's why we have a negative slope. Horizontal lines in general, they have zero slope. The slope is zero simply because there is no rise. And vertical lines, the slope is undefined. In fact, later on we discuss the concept that it's not even a function. So what do we know? HL, short for horizontal lines, have the equation of the format y equals b, where this point has coordinates 0b, and the VL, or vertical lines, x equals a, the slope is undefined, the x-intercept here is located at a comma 0. What else do we want to add? Standard form of a line. When we look at line, the standard form is in the form of ax plus by equals c. If we solve for y, becomes a unique format known as slope intercept form, y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. And it's really a good practice to write 0 comma b, so we know the pair instead of just writing b. Point slope, y minus y1 equals m times x minus x of 1. Point slope. So standard form, slope-intercept form, point slope form. What else we want to add? Parallel lines and perpendicular lines. Two lines are considered parallel if they have equal slopes but different y-intercepts. Two lines are considered to be perpendicular if their slopes are negative reciprocal of each other. They meet at a point with a 90-degree angle. So two lines are parallel, they have equal slopes, different y-intercepts. Two lines are perpendicular. That means they make a 90-degree angle at the point of their intersection, where the relationship between their slope is such that you can say m sub 2 is negative 1 over m sub 1, negative reciprocal, or their product is negative 1. Negative 1. All right, so that was the synopsis of what we need to move on. I hope everything is fine and it's coming back to us. We want to answer this question. Answer for parts A and B. Graph the following lines in a rectangular coordinate system and clearly show the intercept on the graph. Well, when we look at the first one, x equals negative 2, we remember this represents a vertical line, up and down. X equals negative 2, that means the x-intercept is at negative 2 comma 0. Right here, negative 2 comma 0. So let me just move that. So that's negative 2 comma 0. You draw a vertical line right then and there. So that's the graph for part B. y equals 3, we locate the y-intercept at 0, 3. Let me move that. And then we draw a horizontal line or parallel to the x-axis. That is the graph of a horizontal line. We want to find the equation of a line that contains those two pairs. Granted, we can go through the process of finding it using the point slope and then writing it accordingly. However, we may notice that the x coordinate for the first one is 4. The x coordinate repeats for the second one. Therefore, you really don't have to do anything. You recognize it is a vertical line with the equation of x equals 4. Again, we have two pairs. They both have the same x coordinate. So in one shot, x equals 4 is the equation. On the other hand, when we look at this part, we notice the two pairs have the same y coordinate, which means, again, we don't have to go through the process. We can right away recognize this is a horizontal line with the equation y equals -7. It is fixed at y equals -7, and that's the difference between the two. All right. So vertical lines, horizontal lines. All right. In this case, we want to find the equation of a line in slope-intercept form that passes through the points -3, 10 and 5, -6. And we want to go through the process. We want to find the intercepts and we want to graph. First, at the bottom, I'm reminding you of what we have here. The equation of a slope, m equals y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. The point slope in the form of y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. If we continue and solve for y, becomes y equals mx plus b, which is in slope-intercept format. Again, I'm reminding you parallel lines have equal slopes, different y-intercepts, perpendicular lines. Their slopes are negative, reciprocal of each other. So what do we do? The very first thing we do is to use this formula to find the slope. The slope is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. So these are the two pairs, -6 minus 10, that's the numerator, over 5 minus -3. That's the denominator, and that's the slope. So all we have to do, simplify this. The top is -16. The bottom is 5 plus 3, 8. And we end up with -2. So we have this slope. We are going to use the point slope y minus y1 equals m times x minus x sub 1 and in conjunction with the slope that we found and one of these points to come up with the answer. So I'm going to start with the first point, and then I'm going to make an observation in a moment. So if I use any of those points, will do the job. So if I were to use this one, y minus 10 equals m negative 2x minus negative 3, which means positive 3. So I want you to hold on to that, and I want to show you if I were to use this point, what happens, just so you see. If I were to use this point, then I would have y minus negative 6, which means y plus 6, equals m, which is negative 2, x minus x sub 1, and this time is 5. And as you can see, these two equations are completely different. However, if you solve for y, they become identical. And that's the key. Because the slope-intercept form is unique, we rather use that. So right at the bottom here, we get y minus 10 equals minus 2x minus 6. We are going to move the negative 10 and make it positive 10 on the right, and we get y equals minus 2x plus 4. Notice again, I want to make sure when we move this, it's positive. Now, if you finish this, and I'm going to leave it for you to do that, you will end up with the same answer. However, one way you can check your work, I want to make sure everybody understands again an easy way to check your work. This one, we use the first pair to come up with. Why don't we check it with the second pair? Meaning replace the x with 5. So minus 2 times 5 minus 10 plus 4. Is that equal to negative 6? The answer is yes. And that proves we haven't made a mistake. I'm going to show you because this is extremely important. So you would check with this, which means y is equal to, and I'm going to put a question mark because we are checking minus 2 times x, which is 5, plus 4. And as you can see, it does check. And that's the idea. So you can use one of those pairs and then check it with the other pair. All right. The next step is we want to graph this. And as always, we can use the given two pairs. We can use these two pairs to graph. But a better course of action is to use intercepts because they give us a more precise graph. One of them is given as 4, obviously, which means the pair 0, 4. The other one, if you set this one equal to 0, because to find intercepts, if x is 0, find y. If y is 0, find x. That's how you find the intercepts. So if you set this one equal to 0, then x becomes 2, and that's how we get this pair. So we can plot 0, 4, that means go up here 4, then 2, 0 to the right 2. So plot those two pairs, connect the two pairs. That's your graph, by the way, again, the x-intercept, that means where the graph crosses the x-axis, the y-intercepts, that means where the graph crosses the y-axis, and if you look at the two pairs, they also belong there accordingly. So you could always use the original pairs, but it's a good practice to use intercepts just to be on the safe side. All right, in this example, we want to find the equation of a line that is perpendicular to this and passes through this point. And of course, we want to find the intercepts and graphs. So let's see how we tackle this question. Well, we need to find the slope for the given line first. This line, in order to find the slope, we solve for y, which means we're going to divide everything by 3. So this becomes 1/3 x, and the other one becomes negative 4/3. Therefore, this is your slope, m sub 1, meaning the slope of the given line. Or if somebody asks, what is the slope for a line parallel to it, that would give you the same answer. Now, what is it that we want? We want a line which is perpendicular to this. Therefore, we have to find the slope for that one, which is the negative reciprocal of this one. Reciprocal of this one is 3/1 or 3. Negation gives us negative 3. Again, we are going to use the point slope. Y minus y1 equals m times x minus x of 1. By using this slope, negative 3, and this pair, so y minus 1 equals minus 3x minus negative 2, which means positive 2. Notice this is minus 3x when we distribute, minus 6, and we are going to move this negative 1 to make it positive 1, resulting in y equals negative 3x minus 5. And again, you can always check your work. Of course, we don't have a second pair, but the same pair, if you plug in negative 2, you get positive 6 minus 5 is 1. That means this process was done right. Doesn't mean this was right or anything else, but the process of plugging it into this point slope was right. Now, we want to graph this, and so it's a good practice to come up with both lines, the graph of both lines and their intercepts. So going back to this one, I want to graph this line. So I need two pairs, and the best pairs are intercepts. So for example, if I set x equal to 0, then y becomes minus 4/3. So one more time, if I set x equal to 0, practically this goes away. So y is minus 4/3. If I set y equal to 0, this whole thing becomes 0. So x minus 4 is 0, x becomes 4. And that's how I get those pairs. So we have 4, 0, that's easy right here, but minus 4/3 is -1 and 1/3. So this is -1, this is -2. So between -1 and 2, 1/3 of the way down becomes minus 4/3 here. And as I said, 4, 0 here. So plot those two pairs, connect them. This is the original line, the given line. What about the new line? Well, we need two pairs for them also. And again, this is your y-intercept. That means 0, -5. What about your x-intercept? If I set this one to 0, let's do that quickly. If I set this one equal to 0, 3x equals -5, and x is -5/3. So we have those two pairs, 0, -5. So go down here by 5 units, 0, -5. -5/3, that means -1 and 2/3. This is -1, this is -2. Cut this into 3 pieces and go 2 pieces to the left. So -1 and 2/3. So you have those two pairs, connect them. And notice this pair -2, 1 given also belongs to the line as expected. Now, if this grid is 100% in a proper format where the x-axis and the y-axis are identical, this looks precisely 90 degrees. Okay, so if it's square, there seems to be in a rectangular shape. Maybe the x along the x-axis a tad longer than the y-axis. That's why it may be a tad off. But if it's not, then this is a 90-degree angle, the point of intersection. Okay. So that's the -2, 1. We'll look at this application. Could somebody be kind enough to read this question for us, please? Everything from A to Z. Could somebody read this, please?
I can read it.
Please.
A retired woman has $50,000 to invest, $50,000 to invest, but needs to make $6,000 a year from the interest to meet certain living expenses. One bond investment pays 15% annual interest. The rest of it she wants to put in a CD that pays 7%. A, if we let X be the amount the woman invests in the 15% bond, how much will she be able to invest in a CD? B, set up and solve the equation for how much the woman should invest in each option to sustain a $6,000 annual return.
Excellent. This is a class of problem known as a mixture problem. And by the way, they may give us the X or not. We can always figure it out on our own. You can, generally speaking, use any variable of your choice. If you're asked to use X, you follow that. But this is a class of problem known as mixture problem, when the total volume, in this case, the total investment, they add up. So here's what we need to do. We have the investment, number 1 at 15%, number 2 at 7%, and here's the total. So the amount of interest, and by the way, this is simple interest over the course of 1 year. Remember that I equals P R T. P is the amount of principal, R is the rate, T is the time in years. So what's happening is that we are going to use X here, then this is 50,000, the total. And we need $6,000. So X is the amount they told us to use here. The total amount we have is 50K. And the total amount of interest we need is 6,000. So X 50,000, 6,000. So if that is the case, how much do we need here? If the total is 50,000, if we have X amount, the rest of it goes in here. That means 50,000 minus X goes in here. So how much interest do we pick? Well, I equals PRT. This is 15%, so 0.15 times X, and T is 1. 1 year. Let me. This annual interest refers to 1 year. So this is 0.15 times X here. This is 0.07 times this amount, 50,000 minus X. 0.15X, 0.07 times 50,000 minus X. And these two must add up to give us $6,000. Well, we are practically done. We are going to distribute, and I hope you know when you want to multiply these two, basically multiply 7 and 5, it's 35. This has 2 decimals, this has 4 zeros. We have 4 minus 2, 2 zeros, so it's 3,500. This is minus 0.07x, and the right side doesn't change. I want to make sure that everybody understands what I just said here. When you multiply powers of 10, just ignore the decimals, ignore the zeros, multiply these two is 7 times 5 is 35. This has 2 decimals, this has 4 zeros. 1 decimal cancels out 1 zero. So 2 of them cancels out 2 zeros, we have 2 more zeros. Now 0.15 minus 0.07 gives us 0.08x. We subtract the 3,500 and we get 2,500 on the other side. Then we have to divide by 0.08. And we get 31,250. The rest of it, meaning 50,000 minus 31,250, is invested at 7% return. So a quick recap. We must set up a table like this. The amount they add up to 50,000, that's why it is called, in essence, a mixture problem. So 50,000 minus X is here, X is here. And then the I equals PRTT is 1 because we are looking at annual interest in just 1 year. The product of these two is the amount of interest we get from the first investment. The product of these two, by that I mean 7% or 0.7, is what we get from this investment, and they must add up to the total amount that we need. And this 50,000 minus X was the answer to part A. This equation is the start of answering part B and then going through the process of solving it. Now, you can always check. How do you check? If you multiply these two numbers plus multiply these two numbers, they must add up to $6,000. That's how you check your work, everybody. Multiply the two and you can check your work. $0.15 times $31,250 plus $0.07 times $18,750 and you have $6,000. You can check it. Questions? All right. Could somebody read number 8 for us, please?
I can.
Please.
Flora starts riding her bike at 20 miles per hour. After a while, she slows down to 12 miles per hour and maintains that speed for the rest of the trip. The whole trip of 70 miles takes her 4.5 hours. For what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour?
Thank you so much. This is a class of problem known as motion problem. In the case of a motion problem class, we use D equals RT. For example, if we are doing 50 miles per hour over the course of 2 hours, we cover 100 miles. With that, we should know R is D over T and T is D over R. The point being, when we know motion problem, when we know D equals RT, the other two equations come from it because one may be given, the other ones are missing. It's extremely important to understand the concept. So anytime we have a motion problem, the best course of action is to come up with a proper table. So I want to show you how the table works. D equals RT. Remember what we are doing here? We are starting at a certain speed, 20 miles per hour, and then we go down to 12 miles per hour. So the table starts looking like this, starting after a while, and the total, here's the rate, here's the time, here's the distance. And we are going to fill up this table with everything that we can here. So the very first number, we are starting at 20 miles per hour. So it goes in here. Then what happens after a while? Down to
She slowed
12. Very good, very good. Slowing down to what? 12 miles per hour. And so it goes right here, 12 miles per hour. Now, we continue reading. The point being, if you properly fill up this table, you can easily come up with the answer. And not only that, you can easily solve any motion problem. Come up with the table, fill it up. So we continue reading. It says the whole trip of 70 miles, distance, total, 70 miles. Takes how long? 4.5 hours. The total distance, 70 miles, the total time, 4.5 hours. Here's the timing, and here's the total time, 4.5 hours. So for what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour? That's the idea that we want to come up with. And now, basically, let's go with the time and take it from there. So how long does it take over here? We have no idea. X, Y, Z, T. Okay, if we go with T as far as time is fine. So that one is T. Then what time goes in here? When the total is 4.5, what do we put in here? 4.5
plus or minus T.
minus T. Perfect. So now we look at this formula. D is R times T. So if we multiply these two, gives us the distance here. If we multiply these two, gives us the distance here. So the first one, 20t. The second one, 12 times 4.5 minus t. And this distance plus this distance gives us the total of 70 miles. This gives us the equation. So again, reading the question, filling up the table, and the last column gives us this equation. And practically, we are done, because the hardest part is to figure out how to do this table. If you can come up with the table, you can easily nail it. So let's take it from there. So we distribute 12 times 4, 48, half of it, 6, it's 54, minus 12t. (20t) minus 12t gives us 8t. Subtract 54 from 70, you get 16. Divide by 8. And you get 2. T equals 2. And as always, we put the units. Now, what's important is to read and make sure we have answered the question. It says, for what distance did she travel at 20 miles per hour? Did we answer the question? No. So for this one, what was the distance? 20t, 20 times 2, 40 miles. That is the answer to the question. So anytime you do word problems, you must make sure you answer the question accordingly.
I have a question.
Of course.
Could you just go over again how you got from 20t plus 12 to parentheses 4.5 to 8t plus 54 equals 70?
Sure. (20t) Does this work so far?
Yes.
This is 54. 12 times 4.5. 20t minus 12t.
Oh, okay.
Great.
Thank you. Let me get a
My
screen.
pleasure. Anytime. So we get this one. Let's just show everything. So we're going to subtract 54. 80 is 16. T is 2, and that is not the answer to the question, because the question is asking for this distance. 20 times t. Just in case if they ask you, how long does it take? The first portion of a trip is 2. The second portion is 4.5 minus 2. So we can answer all those questions. 2.5 hours here. Depends on whether they ask or not. All right, I want to go to the next question, everybody. So we're going to clean up. Here's the next question, and to make sure we can see everything, let me hide this. Could somebody read this question, please?
I can.
Please.
First, solve the formula for W P equals 2L plus 2W. Then use your result to find the width W of a rectangle whose length is 15 and whose perimeter is 58.
Excellent. First, I want to remind you of a couple of formulas before we solve this. Here's the width. Here's the length. So I want to remind you, P, the perimeter, has two ways to write them, 2L plus 2W, or 2 times L plus W, and the area is the width times the length, or the length times the width. This is a piece of information from geometry, just to remind everybody. And now we want to go back to the question, and it says first solve the formula for W. That's what we are going to do with this equation here. So the equation of the perimeter, P, and the equation of the area. Let's clean up. So first and foremost, since we want to solve for W, we are going to isolate it by moving 2L to the left. So we move 2L to the left. That means we subtract it from P. To solve for W, we want to divide everything by 2 here. And this is what we get. Now, one thing I want to explain, because I've seen sometimes students making a mistake of crossing these two, and that is wrong. The process is, if you want to separate this into two fractions, you can. I'll show you. You don't have to. You could say P over 2 minus 2L over 2 equals W, which results in P over 2 minus L equals W. So you can't just cross out the 2, because that is wrong. But in any event, at this point, we can plug in. So again, let's clean up. The length is 15, so replace the length with 15. The perimeter is 58, replace it with 58. Two times 15 is 30. You want to subtract that from 58, and you get 28 divided by W, which is 14. So for this case, the width is 14.